Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Journey to Law School. This webinar is brought to you by the Gift of Learning. My name is Eesha Kulkarni, and I am one of the co-founders of the Gift of Learning. My team consists of Shivi Hussain, Ariana Lavade, Amrita Rajiv, and Shirshika Midapadi, as well as our outreach and graphic design ambassadors. So before we begin, I would like to start off by talking a little bit about the Gift of Learning. The Gift of Learning is an online tutoring organization that is working to close the educational gap between students. You can be part of this mission and register to become a tutor. More information about the Gift of Learning can be found on our website and our social media platforms. We also have an active Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Our website has also been updated from the one you see on the screen, so please use the link in the chat to access our website. The topic for today's webinar is the journey to law school. Throughout the webinar, if you have any questions, please send them over to Amrita Rajiv through the chat, and we will ask them during our Q&A session at the end. So please stay for that. Our guest speaker today is Esquire Fabianna Pergolizzi, who is an associate attorney practicing at the Subrogation Department, Workers' Compensation Division of White & William, LLP. So Ms. Pergolizzi, whenever you're ready, you may get started on the presentation.
Can you hear me? Sorry about that. Hi, everyone. Let me share my PowerPoint with you so that you can see. Thank you so much for inviting me to be a guest speaker here for you guys. So today's topic, we're going to be talking about the journey into law school, some tips and tricks into getting into law school. I was kindly introduced. My name is Fabianna Pergolizzi. I'm an attorney, and I've been practicing since 2016. So technically, I'm still a pretty young attorney, but my experience is something that I've gained over the past few years as an attorney. I'm currently barred in Pennsylvania, and I just passed the Florida bar exam portion for the Florida state. And I am an associate attorney at White & Williams, which is a law firm in Philadelphia, and I do workers' comp subrogation. And the reason why I believe that this PowerPoint, this presentation will be helpful for law students is because I know what it's like to be a high school student or a college student wanting to go to law school, obviously. And I know the challenges and difficulties that you personally face when you start to think about, your future and what you want to do and kind of where you want to go. So just to give you a background as to who I am and kind of my educational background, I grew up in Naples, Florida, and I graduated from Georgetown University in 2013. I attended law school at Temple Law, and I graduated in 2016. I passed the bar the first time and started practicing. And I also took a certificate class at Harvard School online to further my education just recently this year. And so just a little journey as to how I got to where I am. I'm going to kind of incorporate it into a platform that you guys can use as to what you can rely on when applying to law school. So let's just get into it. So thinking about going to law school in and of itself is an accomplishment. Thinking about wanting to pursue something beyond where you are in life now is something that is great. And you should be proud of even considering wanting to go on to an endeavor such as this. And one of my favorite quotes is, if it scares you, it might be a good thing to try. And that has always kind of resonated with me, because if it gives you a little bit of fear and it gives you a little bit of drive at the same time, it's probably worth doing. And law school is definitely a very intimidating thing to think about. You think, wow, how am I going to get into law school? Where am I going to go? What kind of law am I going to practice? What am I supposed to do? And it's a big topic to think about, but it's an important one. And so it should be a little scary. If it was easy, everyone would do it and wouldn't be so special. So the first thing to think about is to applaud yourself that you're even considering it as an option. While there are many other amazing fields you can go into, law, I think, is a pretty rewarding one. So let's talk a little bit about like the whole process as to getting into law school. So I like to think about it as 3 different ingredients that go into getting into law school. The first is determining whether law school is right for you. You know, this is a personal question. I can subjectively tell you all the reasons why I think law school is very fulfilling and has enriched my life, you know, personally and professionally, but it's a subjective thing. And it's something that we'll go over during this presentation to kind of gauge where you are in the thought process of if law school isn't, you know, right for you. And this is actually the most common question that students in high school and college ask me, because they're looking for reassurance as to why they're interested in law school. So we'll go into the first part being, you know, why it's right for you. 2, we'll talk about the application process. This is the beginning of the mountain that I like to think about of getting into law school. One of the hardest parts about law school is getting in and getting accepted into law school and what comes with that. So the application process, it's very thorough, and they do that for a reason, because you're really becoming a part of a profession. It's a thorough profession. So there's a lot of nitty gritty to the process of applying to law school, and we'll get into kind of what you need in your application, what you should be thinking about including, and things like that. Preparing for the LSAT, prepping for the LSAT. The LSAT is a standardized exam which you need to take in order to get into law school. It's typically a part of the application. I do understand that this year, with 2020 being a very special year with all of the different challenges that we've had to face this year, I do understand that some schools have waived the LSAT, but we're going to focus this webinar on if the LSAT does apply to your application and what it is that you should be doing or considering to do when planning to go to law school. And then 4th, the best part of the whole process is the enrollment process. That's accepting, that's deciding that this is right for you and you're going to go, and that's the best part. So we'll save the best part for last. So with no further ado, determining if it's right for you. So this was a big question I had. I remember being in high school and I had founded a nonprofit 501c3, and I thought, wow, you know, that was a really interesting process of doing on my own. I think law school might be something I'm interested in, but I also really liked science a lot. So I thought maybe medical school, and I thought maybe engineering. I was kind of all over the map. I wasn't really sure. And it's kind of difficult to know what you want to do when you're 18, or let alone 16, 17, thinking about college. So it's a big question to ask. So let's get into it. So the first thing you want to think about is, do you want to be a lawyer? I mean, what kind of laws, what kind of fields of law actually interest you? Now, I have some students who say, well, I watched Law and Order SVU. Like, does that count? I watch a lot of crime documentaries or podcast documentaries. And I'm not going to say that that doesn't count, because I do think that that could be an elementary way to become interested in law. But there's a lot more to it. And there's a lot of different fields that maybe you didn't even know existed until you're actually in law school. So one of the first steps that I tell students of, you know, in high school, college, or taking a gap year is, you know, if you want to be a lawyer, ask yourself why you're even considering it to begin with, you know. And if you're undecided in the field, like you don't know what you'd want to do, maybe you want to do corporate, or maybe you don't even know what even civil litigation is, that's okay. You don't need to have all the answers right away. The second thing is you want to educate yourself. You know, I wasn't sure what kind of law, you know, I'll get into my journey later, but I wasn't sure what kind of law I wanted to get into. You know, at first I thought, oh, you know, nonprofit work would be awesome. I love nonprofit organizations, still do. I have a passion for it. I love giving back and service. But, you know, I didn't know if that was completely the route for me. And it wasn't until I started to have different kinds of jobs that I was able to narrow and tailor down what I actually like to do. So the first thing you want to do is, what do lawyers even do? Some people don't even know. Some people are scared of lawyers. I tell people I'm a lawyer and suddenly they don't want to talk to me on the phone. And I try to tell people we're more friendly than you think. And so the first thing you want to do is, what do lawyers even do? You know, that's the first thing. And you can Google that, but the best thing to do, which would be this third step, is to network, is to ask, to talk, to speak to other lawyers, to speak to law professors. I think one of the key ingredients in life is networking and connecting. And I'm going to kind of get more into this topic because I think that networking, connecting is the most important part of any kind of professional development or even personal development. So if you want to go to law school, and maybe you know a family friend, or maybe you have a family member, or you just, you know somebody at your school who went to law school, or maybe you don't know anybody who went to law school, but you want to find out, reach out, go on your networking, look at different schools you're interested in, and maybe just write an email saying, hey, I'd love to come visit the school, which brings me to the next part. So after you extensively look at your network and you say, who in my network do I know, or who in my network knows somebody else that could help me maybe figure this out, developing a mentor-mentee relationship. The next step is, how about I go look at a law school? How about I just go see it? You know, sometimes it's hard to envision yourself being somewhere without physically going there and getting a feel for it. It's like if you were going to eat a dinner and you read the description of what the meal is, but it's not the same experience as eating the bowl of pasta. It's obviously very different. So you got to go, you got to visit the schools. And I encourage students to do that. And I know economically, that could also be a challenging thing. And sometimes schools will actually permit different types of scholarships to allow students to visit law schools, or your school itself, like a high school, could, you know, develop some sort of trip, or your college can develop some sort of trip. And also, if you're unable to physically visit a school given pandemic issues, the other thing you can also do is go on a virtual tour. A lot of campuses actually permitted virtual touring throughout their school. They actually had like a drone, take pictures of the campus, they have interviews with different students, and you're actually able to follow up with admissions, asking them additional questions about the school. And that's really the best way to get it. If you can't get a physical feel, you might as well see if you can feel an emotional feel through the virtual experience. Nothing's wrong with that. So the second portion of what you want to do, the second ingredient, is the application process. I remember applying to law school, and I thought, when I was at Georgetown, I thought, you know, where do I want to go to law school? I mean, I don't know what I want to do, but I know I want to be a lawyer. And I thought, all right, well, let me do the application and then I'll figure out where I want to send it. So the application. I spoke to the dean of my current law school, who's an amazing person, Dean Mandel, and I asked him, if there's one thing that you could tell students who are considering law school, what would it be? I'm just curious from a dean's perspective, what it is that you want college students to be thinking about. And, you know, you could read this, but to just namely give you the opinion here, you know, at least my law school, which I'm obviously a proud alum, they're looking for students who have passion, right? They want people to be unique. 2020, if anything, has been a year where people have learned that being unique is really important. Being different is important. You're supposed to embrace those things. You know, being a different person than another brings more flavor to the table, and that's what we want to be open to discussing. And that's like a perfect thing for law school. We need more opinions in order to have better conversations, to have more cosmopolitan ideas in the world. And that's what we're looking for here. So when you're thinking about an application, you may think, well, I just want to like kind of be the standard student who applies. This is my name, this is my age. And then you have a personal statement, which you're going to write. And you're going to say, well, what's safe? What can I write about? You don't need to be safe. You need to be yourself. And being yourself is the most important thing. And if you're passionate and you have an interest and a drive for law school, you're going to be able to find a topic that works for you. But don't lose sight of who you are in the application process, because it is grueling. It's a lot of work, but it's worth it. So that I thought was really important to share, because it wasn't so much of you need an LSAT score, you need a GPA. This was be yourself, focus on that, and the application will really speak for itself. So where should I apply? This was like the magical question that I had. I will be honest, I heard of Philadelphia, but I had never been there before. And I'll share my story as to how I got to Temple a little later in the presentation. But how I got to Philadelphia is my own journey, but there are a lot of law schools. There's 203 law schools in the United States of America. That's a lot of options. How do you narrow that down? And also, you know, average wise, most people apply to 6 law schools. A fun fact, especially now, which is more relevant given the economic strains that a lot of people face this year, a lot of applications allow waivers of application fees. So when you apply, you have a small application fee that you have to pay for in order for your application to be deemed submitted. However, a lot of schools give you a code, and you can actually write to admissions and say, hey, I'm interested in applying to your law school. I wanted to know if you guys offer any waiver codes, and they'll be glad to do it if that's an option that they have. Because a lot of the time, law schools actually host different seminars at colleges or even in high schools where they have little panels of people that you can meet, and they would pass out different brochures and stuff like that. But now that the world's a little different with it being virtual, you want to try to reach out and see if those options are available to you, and maybe sign up for newsletters and things like that to get tips and tricks as to how you can get your application for free. I mean, no one would be upset to have a free application. It's more schools you can apply to if you have one that's free. So application process. Now, this is a chart that I got right from the LSAT, which is a website that pretty much is the Law School Admissions Council website. And this is where you're going to have all of your application processes through. It's like its own application portal. So you're going to start by creating an account. I mean, I don't think I need to necessarily get into that, but you want to create an account and you want to make sure that you have all the things that you're ready for, like your address, everything like that. And then you're going to prepare for the LSAT. The application itself is pretty standard. I mean, especially as like a college student, unless you've moved a lot, there isn't too much to fill out as to like biographical information or geographical information, things like that, depending on the application in school, of course. But the next biggest chunk is preparing for the LSAT. You know, you're going to want to research different schools through the portal to see what it is that they need for their application process, what it is that they require for admissions, how much tuition is. These are all things that you want to educate yourself on. And like I had said previously, on the LSAC website, which is where you would apply, they have these different law school forms that allow you to kind of meet and greet virtually. So that's a good portion of the application process. So let's, I know the LSAT's next in this chunk of things, but basically just to brevy over it. So once you get your LSAT score, you're going to upload it onto the portal. We'll talk about retakers. We'll talk about taking it a second and third time and how that works. Majority of the time, from my understanding, is they take an average, but they usually will report the highest score, or depending on the school, they will just take the highest score as your score. I will admit I took the LSAT twice. I did better the second time, and that was my journey. We'll get into that later. So once you do get the LSAT done, you're going to apply online, and there's a laundry list of things that you're also going to need. And we'll also get into that too, and picking what's right for you. But you're going to need things like letters of recommendation, resume, personal statement, all the nitty gritty. And then the fun part is tracking. You get to see when they got your application, have they looked at it? Are you missing something? That's the most important email you need to look out for. And that's just the nitty gritty application portal process. Okay, so preparing for the LSAT. So the LSAT is this very daunting experience. Okay, I actually recently just talked to a student she's incredibly intelligent, very driven and smart, and she's struggling a little bit with the LSAT, and she's like, I just feel like I can't get over this emotional hurdle I have. Like, I feel like I'm getting defeated. And, you know, I always tell students, and I tell myself in tough times, that failure is something that you should invite in your life, because if we were able to achieve everything that we wanted in life so quickly, it wouldn't be that rewarding. And so you want failure to happen. You want to fail sometimes in order to say, okay, I can learn more. I can do something different and have a better and different outcome. So don't be so worried about the LSAT end game, more so be in it for the game itself. So my dad always instilled in me this quote, which I literally live by, especially when I took the Florida bar this year during a pandemic, which was very difficult. Whatever it takes. So for me, when I went to study for really any exam, didn't matter what it was, I set my desk up, I got the room ready, I put the phone away sometimes. And I said to myself, all right, this is my hour. I'm just going to focus, whatever it takes. We're just going to read it. And sometimes you're going to have days where you study, and some days there's going to be days you review. Some days you just read the same sentence 8 times and it just doesn't stick. And that's okay. Those are days you say, let's just refresh. Let's just try to jog some memories here as to what it is I'm looking at. But either way, the mentality has to be whatever it takes. So if you're going to give up weekends, you got to do it. If you're going to give up time going out after work or after school or You're going to skip out on some fun holidays. I mean, I'll tell you, I don't think I ever went out for Halloween, probably ever, since the beginning, probably sophomore year of college, because everything always happened during Halloween time. I was like, all right, well, it's finals, or it's LSAT or bar exam. It's always something. And I'm like, well, Halloween just may be something that I celebrate another time, right? I can wear the costume when I get my results. So whatever it takes. And, you're going to have people in your life who kind of get frustrated by this process of maybe you being selfish, but being selfish is what you need to be at this point, because it's your career, it's your future, it's your life, and you have to take it very seriously. And really, this mentality of whatever it takes, fight or flight, you got to do it. So different study programs. So now that you're saying, okay, application, I got it all typed out, let's do this LSAT thing. Where do I start? So there are different study programs and platforms that you can use. Personally, I use Princeton Review. This is not a advertisement for that. I'm just telling you what I used. There are a lot of different LSAT prep programs that you can use. There's also private tutoring that you can have as well. And there's a lot of different programs, and a lot of different programs have different costs, and there are different types of levels of programs. A lot of the times, college students are actually able to get a code similar to what I was discussing earlier that allows you to have a discounted cost for programs. So it's something you should always think about considering, and always thinking about, how can I get this for a cheaper amount? I mean, why not, right? So different costs, you should look at different programs and talk to students who may have already got into law school, or maybe your guidance counselor, et cetera, to say, what is the best program, or what are the reviews? When I was applying to law school, the internet was like just a thing. Okay, that makes me feel older, but there wasn't a lot of websites that like reviewed LSAT programs. I can't say I sat there and was like, okay, so like let's just do an Ask Jeeves, which most people don't even know what that is anymore. But it was like Google, and I would say, what's the difference between Princeton Review and Kaplan? Like now you have so many different options and like platforms that you can help educate yourself on. You got to find the right one. But if you're still struggling even with the program, I highly encourage students to get private tutoring. Sometimes it's helpful to just have a second view at the same question that can help you kind of translate what it is that you're looking for, or correct your thinking. That's also what I did for the bar exam. So the key for the LSAT is you have to have motivation. Okay, it's enduring. You're not just going to take it. I mean, if you take it and you score 100%, you're a diamond. I don't know what to say. Most people are not that. So this conversation is for the ones that have to try hard, and you have to keep it up and persevere and have persistence in what you're doing. And you have to have patience. You have to forgive yourself for not getting 100% all the time. Sometimes you get all the questions wrong. Sometimes you just don't know what the reading comprehension was about, and you have to forgive yourself for not knowing what the title should have been. I mean, there are things, there are a lot of different aspects to the test that you're going to get frustrated with, and you just have to say, all right, let's just see where I went wrong here. And you have to remember that you're not the only person that is struggling. That should make you feel a more comfort that more people are struggling taking the exam, which is kind of a weird way of looking at it, but it should comfort you in a way that most people are also having a tough time too. So that's setting yourself up for success for the test. So now let's talk a little bit about the ingredients for your application. So, you have your personal statement, which I mentioned before. You want to talk about something that's different. I remember when I was in high school, there was this the story that came out. I honestly don't know all the details, but it influenced me. I remember this girl wrote a high school college essay about being in a fishbowl and how she viewed the world as a fish's perspective. And I would have never thought to write about that in a million years as a personal statement. And now when I think about it as an adult, I kind of say, wow, that kind of just brings a different flavor to the table. They've been reading the same thing over and over and over again. When you get a new application with a new story, it's interesting. You want to talk about why you want to be a lawyer. What brings you here? What passion do you have? What's your experience? What's your life experience? Don't be ashamed to talk about things that have, where you've had adversity or you've had difficulty in life. Bring those things up. That brings passion and flavor to the table. You want to highlight your uniqueness. No one else is you. The second thing is academic and personal achievement. So a lot of students say, well, I'm not the president of all the clubs of my school. That's okay. I would rather see a student have one club that they have a position in, that they're super passionate about, that they actually know what they're doing, rather than have a laundry list of like a billion things. You know, you have all different topics that don't relate to each other. You can kind of see a pattern of what somebody likes, and it makes it easier for conversations. Just to make a note, I'm actually an alumni interviewer for Georgetown University. So a lot of the time I get college, a lot of the time I get high school resumes, and I get high school personal statements to look at to kind of interview students to talk about Georgetown and why do they want to go. It's a very fulfilling thing for an alumni to do. And, you know, I see resumes and I try to tell them, hey, look, you know, instead of putting a 3-page resume of all these clubs you're kind of a part of, but like not really, I would rather you have one that you talk about that you love. So when you're thinking about applying, you know, you want your resume to be 1 page. And generally, depending on your personal background, experience, and everything else, it should be approximately 1.5 pages maximum when applying to law school. Your GPA and resume. Yes, your GPA is definitely an ingredient for law school. And actually, there's something called an index, which is the scale that can be a little intimidating, but you can go online on the LSAT website, I believe, and you can actually type in your GPA and you can type in your LSAT score, and you can see where on an index you fall. So typically law schools will have a certain GPA and LSAT that they look at, depend as one ingredient of accepting a student. There are many other factors as to why they accept students, but there's an average, and you're able to look at it and say, okay, I fall in this range. This is a school that should be achievable or attainable for me, or this is a school that's a reach. I mean, my scores are a little low, or my GPA is low, my score is high. I think it's a reach, or hell, maybe it's really low, but it's still a reach and it's my dream and I'm going to apply. But at least you know where kind of on a scale the school is. So that kind of helps you. One of the biggest and most important things about applying to law school is disclosing, you know, things that may be that may seem detrimental to your application. Some students fall into some legal issues or some legal problems while they're young, and people do things, you know, whatnot. You want to make sure you disclose, because the profession of law is, you just like you would be in court in front of a judge, a duty of candor. It's a duty of honesty. So, you know, if you're worried about certain parts of your application that you say, I don't really know how to tell my school that, you know, I got in trouble, or maybe I was accused of something, you want to be able to talk to a guidance counselor, or talk to a friend, or talk to a parent, and figuring out how best to disclose that information. Letters of recommendation. One very important advice I can give is, when you are picking people for letters of recommendation, make sure they really know you. Okay, you want somebody to really, really vouch for you. You want someone to fight for you, for that school to pick you. So you don't want someone who like sort of knows you. And obviously you don't want a family member, right? You want somebody who can vouch for you professionally or educationally. So when you're in high school, you want to start kind of reaching out to people that, you know, you're as a networking opportunity. When you're in college, especially, there were a few professors who I absolutely adored at Georgetown. I mean, there were many, but there were a few that I really, really adored. And I remember going up to them after class and just talking to them about their experience and everything. And I remember I felt comfortable enough where I could say, this person can vouch for me. They could tell my law school they should pick me because they know I want this. They know what kind of student I am. And I trusted them to do that. You don't want somebody who's going to give a letter of recommendation that's like halfway there. You want someone to say, this is who you should take. You know, you want a cheerleader. Okay. So that's really important when thinking about letters of recommendation. And then obviously we've talked about this at length, but the LSAT score is obviously a part of the ingredient. So the fun part, accepting the right law school for you. So just a fun basic law principle. When you have a contract, somebody gives you an offer, and sometimes you don't like the offer. So you say, I want a different number, and you counter. And then they give you another offer, right? And then at the end of the day, you're the one who accepts the offer. So remember the power you have when it comes to this process. You say, I want to go to your school. I'm deciding to pick you, okay? A lot of students feel so intimidated by the process, and they feel like the school has all the power, but it's really 50-50. I mean, they're picking you. They're vouching for you to come to your school because they believe in you and they think you're a great applicant. And at the end of the day, you get to say, I chose you. This is where I'm going. So remember the power you have in saying yes, and how important it is to say yes, and why you must be educated on why you want to say yes before doing so. So there was a study that came out by a professor at Roger Williams University, and it was very interesting. It kind of asked, well, it focused on why students went to certain law schools. And there are various factors. I mean, some students go to law schools for brand, they like the brand name. Some students go because of job placement or geographically, close proximity to home or different financial aid options. Bar passage rate, sometimes people say, well, this law school has a high bar passage rate, so that's attractive to me. That means that these students are passing the bar. That's the ultimate goal of law school, to pass the bar and be a lawyer. Obviously, not all Juris Doctors do that, but that's because they're going a different path. But needless to say, that's an attractive feature as to why you would want to go to law school. So you want to ask yourself, when thinking about the grand scheme of things, what's important to me? For me, proximity to home wasn't necessarily the highest significant factor for me, because I was already living in Washington, D.C. before I was even applying to law school. So I said, okay, I'm already in a city that's far away from Florida, and I'm comfortable with that. But for me, reputation was important. And also the different programs that my school had. My school had a lot of different clinical programs that was very interesting. But I'll get a little later into why I loved Temple personally. But there are a lot of different opportunities for you to explore as to why these options are great. And these are all researchable options as well. So I'll talk to you a little bit about my experience going to Temple and why these photos are being shown. So like I said earlier in this webinar, I run a nonprofit 501c3. It's called Project Anti-Bully, and it raises awareness of the prevalence of bullying. And at the time, I was doing a lot of work in college regarding research and community-based research, and doing a lot of different presentations and a lot of different speaking opportunities at schools for students. And I was really in love with what I was doing. And I got invited to a symposium to just come as, somebody to attend. And it was an anti-bullying symposium at Temple Law back in 2013. It was right when I was applying to law school. And I remember I asked my dad, I said, Dad, can I go? And he's like, oh, sure, go check out Philadelphia. Why not? You're going to a law school. You might as well look at it. I'd never been to Philadelphia before, maybe a layover at an airport, but I'd certainly never been there as a city. And so I said, all right, I'll go. And I went, and lo and behold, I sit next to the dean of the law school, not knowing that she's the dean of the law school because I failed to do my research beforehand. And I'm sitting there and she's talking to me, and I'm telling her, oh yeah, I'm really interested in this law school. It sounds really cool. And, I like the location in Philadelphia. It's great. And she goes, why don't I talk to you after the symposium? And she goes, oh, so I'm the dean of the law school, and I would love to get coffee with you tomorrow if you're going to stay. And I said, okay. I told my dad, I got to stay. I got to meet the dean of the law school tomorrow. And he's like, what, right now? I was like, yeah, right now. She wants to talk to me about law school. And I remember I had an opportunity of a lifetime to sit in her office, and she just talked to me as a person, being like, why do you want to go to law school? And she was a really powerful, successful woman. Of course, I Googled everything about her before I met her the next day. And I was thinking, wow, she is so impressive. Here she is, the dean of a law school, a major law school in a major city. And she's talking to me, just a college student. And I just felt so honored to even have that personal connection, where I really felt like she was interested in me as a person. And it made me feel like this school was more than just paper for me to apply to. This was a personal thing, and I felt a personal connection. And she said, why don't you sit in the law class tomorrow? Just sit in it and see what a law class is like. I said, well, okay. I had no idea what a law school class was like. I'd seen some movies. Honestly, I thought it would be terrifying. It kind of was, I won't lie. They did cold call, and I was like, oh my God, please don't pick me accidentally. I don't know anything that's going on. So I walked in, I actually sat in another student's seat. And everyone stared at me because I was obviously not a law student in that class. And I sat there and just listened and just watched. And I was like, wow, this is awesome. I mean, it was constitutional law. It was I don't know what they were talking about when I sat there. And I'm not sure if I still do. But I sat there and I remember thinking wow, the students are so nice. They all came up to me to talk to me about why they love Temple, why they love the school. They invited me out to dinner that night. They said, come on, come meet us. We want to show you what the city's about. I just thought, oh my God, these people are people, and they're personal people. And that's what I need. They're passionate about life and connecting and networking. And I just had this feeling where I just said, I feel like Temple's pulling me there. I'd never been to the city before. And I said, why not? And so the dean goes, so did you apply yet? And I said, oh, I'm almost done with my application. And like immediately went to my hotel and submitted my application. I was like, please pick me. And like immediately Temple became the #1 school for me. And I absolutely loved it. And so for me, whenever I see students who are interested in going to law school, I tell them it's so important to meet people, to talk to people, to get a feel for who goes there, get a feel for the type of people it attracts or the city that it's in, because this is going to be your life for 3 years. I mean, you may be living in a library the first 1, 2, 3 years, and maybe the whole time, but it's in a city that you're going to walk around in to get there. So you're going to want to know all of the factors, and that personal experience is really important. So that's my background as to why I picked Temple. And it's a special story for me. So yeah, I would love to answer any questions that you guys have, especially, pertaining to different, career paths with legal field as well, like why and what I've done in my career to get to where I am. So I'll leave open the floor for you guys.
That was a very helpful presentation. Like, I'm interested in law, and a lot of I've heard that law school is like really daunting. The LSATs are like hard, but then this presentation like put it in like very simple terms. So it seems like something that's more manageable and something that like I could possibly do. And a lot of people in this webinar probably feel the same way after the presentation. So thank you so much for that.
If there's one thing I can say to anybody listening to this or listening to it in the future, is that you have to believe in yourself. Because if you don't believe in you, how is anybody else supposed to? So when you're sitting there and you want to better your life and you want to enrich it and you want to take on daunting tasks that may seem daunting and scary for some and ridiculous for others, you have to say, I believe in myself, and you're going to do whatever it takes to get there. And so anybody listening to this can do it. They just have to have the passion for it.
Yeah. So the audience sent in questions during this webinar and before. So let's first start off with questions that were sent before. These first few questions are about your high school and college experience, like at Georgetown and before law school. Mm-hmm. So you've already kind of answered this when you that you wanted to become a lawyer, but when did you know that you truly wanted to be one? Like when you decided between either going into medical school or being an engineer, when did you decide that being a lawyer was the thing for you?
That's a really interesting question because it's not straightforward, unfortunately. I think I realized I wanted to be a lawyer after I got myself involved with my nonprofit. But I was really solidified in wanting to be a lawyer when I tried my first case, which was when I was a law student. Temple actually allowed law students to take on cases. I remember being in law school and being very nervous and being very self-conscious, thinking, God, I'm such a baby law student. I don't know what I'm doing. And I hear the school's trusting me to take a deposition, which I didn't even know what that was until I had to learn what it was that day. And I remember when I had my first arbitration case and I won, I thought, oh yeah, this is what I want to do. This is where I'm supposed to be. And it was the right field for me. But, there isn't one day I woke up and said, law school's right. It was more law school made sense for what I wanted. But there's so many different fields in the world that people need to think about. But for me, networking really, really helps solidify that.
Yeah. So that kind of goes on to the question about internships. Internships are a great way for people to kind of get a hands-on opportunity before they go into a field. So are there internships law-related professions for high schoolers and college students? Or do you kind of just have to wait till you're in law school for that kind of stuff?
So there are definitely internships that you can take part of. I think what I'll say primarily is very important in high school, particularly to focus on education. So I definitely want to say that, becoming educated and doing well in school is obviously your main priority. Some people have to actually, financially support themselves in high school as well. So working is something, but internships are really important. You can work as an intern for a law firm just to get a feel for what a law firm's like. In fact, I actually encourage that. I wish I had done that prior to law school. Instead, I had a bunch of different types of jobs in college. But I think it would have given me an extra edge because I would have had an idea of what certain things looked like. So getting an internship, and also typically the internships will be free. So it's not necessarily the most challenging thing to get because a lot of firms would love the help to have a student helping them, as long as you're willing to put the work in for it.
So on the note of extracurriculars, what extracurriculars did you do in high school? Like,
So my extracurricular activities, I was a part of a lot of like computer programming type of clubs. I was more interested in that type of thing. But like I said, my real extracurricular activity was my nonprofit at the time. I mean, it started off as like a small chat room online, which was like a hot topic back then. That was like a thing that didn't exist. And then it developed into a nonprofit eventually. So I heavily spent a lot of time doing that as a side extracurricular activity. But when it comes for students, what kind of extracurricular activities can they think about? I mean, mock trial is something that you could definitely think about. I didn't do mock trial. I'm not even sure if my school had it. But mock trial or a key club, it helps teach you like organizational skills, things like that. I would also recommend taking like a different language as an extracurricular activity because it really is helpful. Like I speak Spanish, so for me in my legal profession, I'm able to really utilize that, and high school really helped me with that, especially getting into college. So, any kind of extracurricular activity you do is okay for law school. There's no like specific thing that says, okay, this was pre-law. You know what I mean? Like you can be any kind of lawyer you want. It's more about the passion. It's more about why you chose it, why you like it, what makes it your own. You know what I mean? So you could really do anything.
mm-hmm. So on the note of different like things to go into the field, a lot of people think that you kind of have to take political science or pre-law as majors to get into law school. So is that true, or are those just like recommended majors?
So that's a good question. I never took those classes. But what I'll say is I don't think it wouldn't hurt. I mean, I do think that there is an audience for that. And I do think a lot of people who pursued law school did go that route. I mean, I definitely took a lot. I graduated with a psychology degree. So for me, I was more interested in that kind of realm, but I knew I wanted to go to law school. But I do know a lot of people, especially at Georgetown, were very into political science, very into politics, and things like that. And they took a lot of different type of pre-law classes. And I think it only gives you an extra exposure into what the legal profession is like. But personally, I didn't take it, so I can't vouch for it being a necessity. Well, it's obviously not a necessity if I didn't take it. But I do think it's something that should be considered just to kind of give you an extra exposure into something.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because like you hear about a bunch of lawyers, well, you probably know a bunch of lawyers, but a lot of them do and major in political science, but then there are also lawyers who decide to like do something outside of political science and they still end up in law school and they're still really good lawyers.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so one of the most daunting things about law school is the LSAT. And I'm a high schooler, so the SAT is like a really big thing for me, and a lot of my friends have already started studying for it. But does the LSAT also like kind of, when do people really start studying for the LSAT? Like, should a high schooler start studying, or should someone wait till college?
So I think it's funny because now that I think about my previous conversation, I kind of glossed over the SAT as a part of how to get into college and then the LSAT. But the LSAT for me, I started studying for it as a junior because I thought, hey, why not study early? I think senior year is going to be a lot because I've got to apply places. So I always encourage studying earlier. I mean, even for the bar exam, I studied months before other people were typically starting because it gives you a time to kind of absorb material or just kind of be familiar with it. Half of these types of tests have to do with conditional familiarization of what it looks like. So if you're able to look at it and say, I know what to expect, it helps you to kind of calm down and really focus on what you need to do. So I suggest, junior year is a year that you start to really think about it. You could even do it your second semester of junior year. And I think that you don't have to necessarily have an intensified course, but it could be just something that you get the course, you start to look at it, maybe spend a couple hours on the weekend. It can never hurt. And even some law schools, I know Georgetown particularly, because I had a friend who got accepted, they were able to apply to law school as a junior without taking the LSAT. So some schools actually allow you to do that without taking the LSAT. So you want to start thinking early junior year, does my school offer that kind of option? And two, if they don't, this is some of the routes I can take.
Yeah, that I did not know that law schools let people in without taking the LSAT. That's pretty cool.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So on the note of scholarships, you talked a bit about scholarships earlier, but so is the scholarship application process a lot like the process that high schoolers go through?
For college, you mean?
Yeah, for when high schoolers apply to colleges.
Yes, it's very similar. You have your federal student loans that you would want to take out if that's the route you need to take, and you have the financial aid portion of the application, which is very similar to the kind of college one that you'd fill out. One of the interesting things that you can consider when deciding on law schools is obviously the amount of tuition costs. But beyond that, if you get into two law schools that are competing law schools and you get a scholarship in one law school and maybe no scholarship in the other law school, it's best to let that school know, that secondary school, hey, I'm interested in coming to your school. You're my number one choice, but I got a scholarship somewhere else. So what's the best offer you can give me? You might as well negotiate because you've already got that acceptance to say, I really want to come here, but I need some assistance. And actually, that's something that I know a lot of people personally did with their applications, and they were able to get a different kind of financial scholarship or package as a way of becoming more attractive for the law school, because the law school already wants you. Right? So there are different avenues. And also when you're applying to law school, a lot of law schools actually have a list of different specific scholarships, like ethnic scholarships, or kind of like professional accomplishment scholarships that say, if you've done this kind of thing, or if you're interested in public policy or environmental law, whatever. There was an Italian scholarship that I got when I was at Temple Law School. And, I was grateful for that. And, you should apply to all of the ones that applied to you. So there are a lot of different opportunities that are presented, I think, beyond just what college may offer.
So these scholarships are only for citizens, correct? Or can someone?
I wouldn't know the answer to that question. It would have to be something that you'd have to check with the school, but everything should be pretty specifically laid out on the application.
Okay. So moving on to law school now. Mm-hmm. So other than the fact that you solely study law in law school, obviously study law, right. How else was law school different from grad school or maybe high school?
So, I can only obviously speak for my experience in law school, but I have a lot of friends who went different routes than I did. I know that law school is a very, they call it a jealous mistress, okay, because you're there a lot, all right? It steals a lot of your life. There's a commitment process to it. There's a dedication that I think has a different taste than other grad schools. I mean, maybe similar to medical school, or if you're pursuing a nursing degree, things like that. That's just a very generalized statement. But when it comes to law school, I think that the dedication and the commitment is very different than some other programs that maybe allow for more flexibility, or maybe the workload is different. You're really fighting for the career in law when you're in law school. So when it comes to high school, I mean, it's tremendously different. In high school, I think that, you're kind of learning how to learn in high school. And in law school, you're learning how to learn best. I mean, you need to learn how to study, and you need to learn how to absorb very quickly. And it's a process. And I think that, even if you're in grad school, I'm sure don't have any experience in it beyond law school, but I'm sure it's a very competitive, committed, driven based program. But I do know, I remember being in law school and being a little sad that some people could go on vacation or some people could have holidays. And I remember having to be head in the books, focus on what I need to do. So that's just kind of my take on the difference.
Yeah. So which year of law school was the hardest for you?
What did you say?
Which year of law school was the hardest for you?
The first year was definitely the hardest for me. I like to consider myself as a very driven person. I'm very motivated. I like school. I like learning. And for me, I felt a blow when I went to my first year of law school. I felt defeated. There were many times where I questioned myself as to, can I do this? Am I smart enough? Can I accomplish this? And it's because you're learning technically like a new language, and it's difficult to sometimes absorb. And sometimes you got to learn different tactics as to how to absorb it. One method may not work. You got to establish a new method. And then by your second year, you say, well, I know none of those work, and this is what I need to do. It's like kind of like trial and error. So I think the first year, a lot of students suffer with this insecurity feeling of, where am I in this realm? Am I supposed to know the answers as to what my future is? What kind of job am I going to get? What are my grades going to be? There's a lot of questions. And if I could go back in time, and I say this all the time about my whole life, but if I can go back in time and tell myself one thing, it's always going to be, it works out how it's supposed to. Just focus on the small ingredients to your life that make the bigger picture, and everything works out. If you work really hard and you're dedicated and you're going after what you want, you're doing all the right things, only good can come out of that. You may not know where that is. You may not know what firm it is. You may not know what state it is, but only good can come from it. So just one step at a time. But definitely the first year was definitely the hardest, I believe.
Were cold calling part of the reason why the first year was so hard? How scary is it?
Oh my God. I remember my first law class ever was contracts, and it was with Professor Hoffman, who was amazing, but terrifying at the same time. And he would agree with that, I think. And he cold called my classmate, and the only limited exposure I had was visiting that class at one time, and that was kind of like a softer class. This was like day one. He's asking all the questions for the case, and I'm like, I didn't even get my books yet, so I'm freaking out, like, don't call on me. And it was terrifying, and you kind of get used to it. And the reason why they do the cold calling is because, you know what, when you're in court and the judge asks you a question, you got to just know the answer of what you're doing. And it becomes more natural. You're kind of like, all right, I'm used to this. Like, you can call on me. I should be able to know what's going on, right? And they expect you to know the answer and be on top of what's going on, just like a boss would if you walked into your office and said, what's going on in this case? Or what's the latest status? Or, what was the ruling? And you have to be sharp and be on your game. And that kind of gives you it gets rid of the fear of that, I think. It kind of gives you the conditioning that you need for later on in your legal career.
To get you ready for the courtroom.
Yes.
So you briefly talked about how you argued a case your first year in law school. So how do these clinics work, and when did you know that you wanted to go into what type of law that you are in?
Sure. So this is an exciting story for me because I remember kind of falling in love with law. That was the most rewarding part of law school. So I joined a clinical, and a clinical was namely my school partnered up with another program that allowed law students to participate in the program. There's various different types of clinicals with lots of different types of companies, firms, and organizations. For me, I worked for a public transportation company as essentially a defense attorney, but a law student, obviously. And so I would be paired with an attorney, and I worked for a transportation company called SEPTA, which was the main transportation company in Philadelphia. And basically it was, auto accidents, slip and falls, things like that. So I did civil litigation, and I was very blessed to be a part of this clinical because they actually allowed me to do things under the direct supervision of an attorney. So an attorney would teach me how to do a deposition, which is namely a question and answering session that's under oath. And you ask, what's your name, what happened, things like that, to get more information as to what happened in a case. And I was able to actually conduct that. It was amazing. I actually got to step into the shoes of being a lawyer, and I was able to actually get a feel for what it was. And then we had something called an arbitration. And in Philadelphia, arbitration is a case that's $50,000 or less. That's the kind of slot that it's put into. And it's called arbitration. It's a court. And I remember the first arbitration case I had. I studied that case. I mean, I read page by page by page, just getting so excited to go to court I had no idea what it was going to be like. I'd never been there. And I remember I got there. I was definitely sweating, shouldn't have wore glasses. They were fogging, but I was so excited. I was like, this is my time. And I remember being a law student winning against an attorney who was a very seasoned attorney and being like, yes, like I can do this. Like I won this case. And I mean, later on in life, I ended up switching to the plaintiff's side, which is for the person who's injured rather than the defense. But I remember falling in love with law and feeling more confident that I could do it because I essentially did. I essentially did do what I set out to do, which was, you know, be a lawyer. So the magic came in the moments that I was able to gain it, and you earn it. And I feel like you earn magic like that every day, and that's why the law is so rewarding, because it's constantly a new fulfilling feeling that you get when you learn something new, or you win a new case, or you win something for your client, or you defend something. So that's kind of what came about. And every law school has their own clinical or clinics. They have a lot of different programs. They have a lot of different trial programs. I know my school particularly had a great trial division program that really trained people to be ready for law, to go to court. And I remember I actually was a TA for a trial advocacy class. So I was actually pretending to be a witness that they would, kind of ask questions to. And it gave me a flavor as to what it would be like to be on the other side, what it's like to hear questions and how questions are said. So it gives you a lot of different opportunities. So when you're applying to law school, it's really important that you look into these clinical programs to say, what might be something I'm interested in trying to be a part of? And sometimes you can actually get hired by the companies or the firms that you worked with. I mean, I have a great relationship with the people I worked with at SEPTA. My old boss, Steve Vidro, has a great part of my heart because he was like the first real boss I had that I felt so connected with and felt like a real lawyer with, and he knows that. And so, a lot of people get hired after as well in these companies. So it's important to look into.
We only have a few minutes left now. So these last few questions are going to be more about how it's like being a professional lawyer and your out of law school experience. Mm-hmm. So what's the most rewarding part about being a lawyer?
The most rewarding part about being a lawyer is that every day I feel like I'm able to learn something new and enrich my life. And in the process of doing that, especially with what I do, I'm able to satisfy the needs of my clients at the same time. So it's really rewarding, not just for me, but also for the clients that I, work for, or the clients who want a certain goal. And it's also rewarding because I feel like at the end of the day, no matter what happens, I can always fall back and say, I'm a lawyer, especially in the year of 2020 when things are very unknown and very unsettled as to job opportunities and job developments and things like that, or job security. It's important to know that you always have that degree and it can't be taken away from you unless obviously something egregious happens where it is. But technically, you're a lawyer and you can rely on that. So it's a good feeling to have.
And the last question for today is, sometimes as a lawyer, you're forced to take cases that you don't necessarily agree with. So how do you deal with that?
So I actually invite those cases in my life because I think that it allows me to have the opportunity to think outside the box and maybe think outside my opinion. And a lot of law is not black and white. It's very gray. And sometimes my opinion or my belief on how a case is at first may not necessarily be exactly what I thought it was until I learned more about the case. And I thought, all right, that's a different way of looking at it. That's a different way I can mold the case. I mean, if there was ever anything ethically that I felt would be of a conflict of interest, that would be a separate kind of topic. But I'm just talking, interest wise, or a case that maybe I thought was very difficult to defend or to push forward for. It's always important to think outside the box or think about your toolbox of facts as to how you can make this still your own, and how you can embrace the facts as they are. Because sometimes the facts are what they are, you can't fight them, and you just got to work with what you're given.
So that's the end of today's webinar. Thank you so much for coming here.
Of course.
We enjoyed learning so much because law school is such a big topic, and it's really helpful learning about it at like a younger age. So I feel more prepared now.
Good, I'm glad. And if you guys ever wanted to connect or network, as I've told you guys before, I love giving back and being able to help law students who are interested in law, because for me, it's so enriching that I feel sometimes you just need someone else to kind of talk to get some motivation. So anytime.
So there were still some unanswered questions that the audience had, and we're out of time. So if you don't mind, could you please put your email in the chat box so
Yeah.
people can reach out to you if they have more questions?
Let me see if I can get there.
Thank you so much. So we'll be wrapping up the webinar. Thank you everyone for coming here, and thank you so much for giving this webinar.
Of course, thank you so much for inviting me. I appreciate it.